Good afternoon, and welcome to this fourth session of in a full day of webinars hosted by the Community Energy for Energy Solidarity Project, or as we commonly refer to it, the CEES project. CEES is a Horizon 2020 funded project that is investigating the degree to which energy communities already are or would like to be involved in tackling energy poverty. And our aim is to identify what measures are most effective and to provide evidence of that effectiveness. If you weren't able to join earlier this morning, we did have our first session was really focusing on describing what CEES is doing and looking a little more in depth at the three main themes, which are energy poverty, energy communities, and energy solidarity, and how those work together. The second session was about how do you identify people who are in energy poverty or vulnerable households within your community, and how do you engage not only with those people, but also with other stakeholders in your community that can help you find those people or also help you deliver more holistic services to help meet the very wide range of needs that people in vulnerable households or people already facing energy poverty typically have. We then had a session just before this one on action. What kind of actions can you take to alleviate energy poverty in those households? And we looked a little bit at soft actions, which is things like helping people learn how to use their energy more efficiently, and often vulnerable households or energy poor households are extremely good at that. So it may also be things like teaching them how to change energy suppliers or to access grants or energy checks that they're eligible. So anything that is sort of on a personal level and doesn't involve hard measures, which we define as the things that would actually make a house or a home more energy efficient. So whether that's renovation or changing a boiler or doing things that are really try to tackle the energy consumption of the household. In this fourth session, what we're going to look at is look more at what do energy communities themselves need in order to take action on energy poverty. And so we're looking at what we call the support aspect of the whole chain of things that happen when you're tackling energy poverty. And we're going to look at two different things. The first is what kind of policy and regulatory or legal support is either in place to help energy communities tackle energy poverty, or often, as we've found through the first research we've done, what isn't in place or what creates a barrier for energy communities to tackle energy poverty in their communities. And the second part of this particular webinar will be about the financial support that energy communities need. And it's going to look at a number of challenges that our partners are currently facing, whether it's in terms of short funding cycles or having their funding primarily from one specific source and the challenges that creates. And then secondly, it's also going to be about how some of them finance themselves differently and have innovative financing models, and how the CEES partners are going to try to take up different financing and funding mechanisms as they go through their pilot projects. So that is the basic description of what this webinar is going to cover. And I'm very happy to now introduce you to Helene Schockhart, who is going to talk first about the work that she's done on regulatory and legal frameworks, both at the EU level and at national levels. And often you need to work on that at the very local level. So let's take this webinar forward. So this session is going to focus on those two challenges. And the first part of the session is going to be about the regulatory and legal affairs aspect. And we have already done, thanks to Helene Schockhart, and I'm probably saying that wrong again, but Helene is with ResCoop EU, and she's a project manager, ResCoop EU, with expertise on energy poverty and energy justice for CEES. She's closely following the European legal framework on energy communities and energy poverty, looking at how both of those are evolving in the context of the EU Green Deal, Fit for 55, Repower Europe, and of course the current crisis is leading to some more changes in that. And for those of you who don't know, ResCoop is the European Federation of Citizen Energy Cooperatives. It's a growing network with 1,900 energy cooperatives, and it represents 1.25 million EU citizens who are active in the energy transition. So Helene, if you're ready, off to you.
I am ready. I will share my screen with you. Thank you for the introduction, Marilyn, and for the great organization of this webinar session. I hope everybody already had a great day and a very interesting and educational day. So I will present in this session the EU regulatory framework on energy communities and energy poverty. Specifically, a recent report that I wrote for the CEES project that aims to provide an overview of existing legislation and policy initiatives on energy poverty and energy communities, and very specifically their interlinkages. So where community energy is seen as a sort of solution towards energy poverty alleviation at both the EU and national level for CEES pilot countries. So CEES pilot countries are Portugal, Croatia, France, and the UK. I haven't specifically focused on the UK because the idea was to look at the transposition of the clean energy package into national law, which of course is no longer an obligation for the UK since they are no longer part of the European Union. So how does this fit into the project? How does this research fit into the project? First of all, it sets the backgrounds against which the CEES pilot partners have created their respective energy solidarity mechanisms, and now we'll also explore new activities in the context of the projects. It also allows us to investigate where things are going, how to anticipate with legislation to how to develop our mechanisms in the future, and how to also provide assessments towards member states and EU policymakers on how to provide better enabling frameworks. So what can you find in the report? Like I said, an overview of the EU legal framework, an overview of the national implementation for CEES pilot countries, and then for each section, you will also find takeaways and recommendations, so either for EU policymakers and national policymakers based on these assessments of what is already out there. So the EU section focuses on energy poverty and energy communities since their first references in energy in the EU legal framework. So that's the clean energy package going to the EU Green Deal. And then I'm also providing a small overview or a brief overview of the current developments under Fit for 55 and Repower EU. And then the following section for national policymakers is based on the assessment of these three member states, but also looks at some literature from going beyond these three, and then adds some recommendations for policymakers too. Before I dive a bit deeper into some more concrete findings, I'll give you a teaser by sharing already the main finding. The EU level made some significant progress on connecting both energy communities and energy poverty to each other, so collective solutions to energy poverty. We see some very specifically interesting leverage points in the recent Repower EU plan. However, none of the member states has reached a state of maturity when it comes to addressing renewable energy communities and energy poverty together. So at all levels, extra effort is needed to eliminate the barriers between social and energy policy, because we think that this is really due to the fact that there's still a lot of existing silos between social and energy policy. And that's why it's very hard to imagine how the two can come together in a form of working together with vulnerable households to design proper and effective legislation. So we think that this is perhaps the biggest challenge to overcome. Then on my next slides, we have an overview of the EU legal framework. So like I said, the first, the story for consumer protection and the first references of energy poverty began in 2003 in the second energy package. Here we are really looking at the rights to information, the right to switch suppliers, the obligation of transparency. But energy poverty really came into EU legislation in 2009 in the third energy package and became a policy priority in the Green Deal. Throughout time, member states became obliged to define energy poverty within their national context, and then the EU always was a bit reluctant to define the concepts at the EU level because it's so multidimensional that it would be very hard to have a definition that is at such a high level and still makes sense. But they had a first attempt in the ongoing Fit for 55 legislative proposal, so that's very interesting and might prove an extra boost for people working on energy poverty. Then the first references to citizen empowerment, on the other hand, can be traced back to 2015 in a communication of the European Commission called the Communication on the Energy Union Strategy. It introduced concepts such as consumer empowerment and consumer protection was not really linked to it. It's in the clean energy package in 2018-19 that we see for the first time in the definitions of renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities that there's also this recognition that these collective actions, citizen-led actions in the energy system can also work towards justice considerations in the energy transition, towards energy poverty alleviation, and that's where it becomes very interesting as well for us. So 2018-19, very important milestone for us. It's where renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities became recognized, got their definitions, and also member states came to be obliged to put in place enabling frameworks for energy communities, also enabling with the obligation to enable access to vulnerable households. So yeah, then in 2019, we have the Green Deal, and then we had this climate law, and now the Fit for 55 and Repower EU plan as a response to the ongoing crisis. We see that there's more and more recognition of the multidimensional role of energy communities. We see more references to vulnerable households, to energy poverty. Energy poverty is being recognized as a growing problem, as a problem that needs to be tackled very soon, with some interesting initiatives such as the Social Climate Fund and the Articles 21 and 22 in the Energy Efficiency Directive. We are really seeing some progress, although all of that is very preliminary because these negotiations are still ongoing as we speak, and it can really go into any direction. So that's all very exciting, also very timely in the current situation. But I won't go too deep into this. I would recommend, of course, to read the paper if you want some more details on all of these aspects. I just want to share with you some takeaways for the EU legal framework. So what needs to be done? Based on the assessment, it's very clear that because there are so little member states that have transposed, first of all, the provisions on energy communities, and a lot of member states are also not that far on recognizing energy poverty as a specific problem. So we need further guidance and clarity from the EU level. At a second step is then that the links between energy communities and energy poverty alleviation should be strengthened. So this can also count as a sort of guidance. Strengthening the links between the two at EU level can also provide inspiration, can provide clarity on how this works, what the role of energy communities is within the energy transition, and how vulnerable households could be helped with this collective empowerment of citizens. So what is also important is that, as I mentioned, energy and climate policies need to be just by design. So we see that there's at this point a lot of reactive measures. They see this legislation or this measure had a negative impact on vulnerable households. What do? We invent another another rule or legislation that mitigates this impact, but it's not just by design. And so to get there, we really need to work with the people that are in vulnerable situations, understand their socioeconomic vulnerabilities, and then start from there. I think that is really the way to go to get rid of all those silos. I see that I'm already talking for quite a while. I still have a lot to say, but I'll try to keep it short. Just stop me whenever you're getting bored.
No, you've got lots of time yet. Keep going. Okay. Don't worry.
So then we're at the national level. So the second part of the paper, as I said, focuses on the member state level for CEES pilot countries. We have assessed the state of play of the transposition of the clean energy package into national law. And I'm going to share here as well some general takeaways and findings. Overall, so I'll start again with an overall assessment. We see different speeds for energy poverty recognition and the energy community movement in different member states. So some member states are very far on the energy community movement, some not. Others are very far on recognizing energy poverty as a specific problem, and others are, seeing it just as nothing different than regular poverty. And then, of course, there's the struggle to connect the two, and that is very universal. Greece, so far, is the only country that has embedded energy poverty alleviation into the law on energy communities, although it's an obligation according to the Renewable Energy Directive in the Clean Energy Package. So some key findings for each of the countries. We have 3. I'll start with Croatia. Croatia has seen some progress in the recent years. There's still a long road ahead when it comes to meaningfully addressing the root causes of energy poverty and recognizing citizens as active participants in the energy system. But we see that the basis for any meaningful strategy towards a just transition is missing, and that is an understanding of the needs and situation of those experiencing energy vulnerability and poverty within their country. So as long as this is missing, it remains very hard to envision any concrete steps to set a just transition in motion. And Croatia is very interesting because this mismatch between social and energy policy has translated itself in a very disincentivizing example. For example, I'll share this with you because I'm always thinking of it as as very telling for the problem that we are facing. In Croatia, you can lose your unemployment status if you join a cooperative. So not specifically an energy cooperative, but a cooperative. So people that are on social welfare enjoying welfare benefits because they are unemployed, they can lose those benefits if they join a cooperative. While a cooperative in se can mean that they gain capabilities and strengthen their collective social cohesion. This is very wrong, of course. Then in France, we have a very a strong community energy movement compared to other countries, but we see that energy poverty is not at all connected to it. So it's not because you support energy communities that energy justice is happening by itself. You really need to it really takes another step, another other skills, it's I'll go a bit deeper into that further on. And then Portugal has made good progress. It connects energy poverty to energy communities in their NECPs, so the National Energy and Climate Plans, but it is not yet translating into anything concrete. So the story doesn't stop there. Now they need to put things into action. And yeah, so recommendations, what needs to be done here at the member state level. And this is, I promise, the last slides. Understand energy poverty. So this is really the beginning. Why are vulnerable households not able to participate in the energy transition in your country? You must understand the socioeconomic realities of those living in energy poverty to understand what needs to be done to solve those realities. So like I said, member states need to assess trade-offs between social and energy policy. Like, for example, the thing that we had in Croatia with losing your unemployment status. So yeah, because of this mismatch, we see that instead of leading to empowerment, all the social policy stuff that is going on around energy policy is not leading to empowerment, but often even leading to households being trapped in their context of vulnerability. Second, identify barriers for renewable energy communities. So you also have to, for renewable energy communities, it's very hard in the first place to set one up because the market is not designed for small players. Identify those barriers and then also identify why it's hard to be inclusive, to work with vulnerable households. It can be knowledge gaps, of course, financial, I mean, yeah, that's very context specific, but therefore, based on these barriers, the right supportive framework should be designed. And then to, as a third one, to all give this a very strong boost, I would recommend that energy poverty alleviation is included in the definitions of renewable energy communities in the national laws, and not just as a copy paste from EU provisions, but also with very specific provisions on how social innovation can be achieved in your country through community energies. But that is up to member states to get together with their local stakeholders and identify how this can be done. And then it's, yeah, the fourth step is, of course, create enabling frameworks and incentives, both for renewable energy communities and for people in energy poverty. As a final comment, I would say recognize energy communities as part of the solution, but not as a final resort. So we still live in welfare states. It is up for our governments to protect us. Energy communities can be a strong tool or a strong ally in this fight against a very persistent issue with our energy system. But we need strong, overarching and bold actions from our governments as well. And yeah, that's it for me. If you're interested to learn more, download the report on our website. And if you want to share your thoughts, suggestions, or feedback, I would be happy to hear about that. Also, other examples from member states, how your member state is doing on supporting energy communities, how they are doing on energy vulnerability, identifying energy poverty. I would love to hear more examples from across Europe. So yeah, I'm very open to that. So send me an email or even give me a call. You can find my phone number on our Rescue EU website. Yeah, that's it for me.
Great, Helene. You did a great job of getting through a lot of content quickly. But we do have a couple of, well, one question for you asked two different ways. But generally the question is, and this is from Liv, how do you figure out whether policy and legal frameworks are kind of paying lip service or actually doing something impactful Have you been able to elicit any information about that? You know, what makes a policy or a regulatory framework truly impactful, and how do you make sure it enhances inclusion?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So how do you identify that? I would say just I've spoken to a lot of people on the ground, hear about their experience with a specific regulation or law and how it has worked out for them. I think this is also a strategy that we use in RESCOPE EU throughout. Also, for example, with the definitions of renewable energy communities, we are now investigating how it has helped them, if they are useful for them, for the actual energy communities that are already out there. And then also just, there's a lot of very strong rhetoric in EU legislation and in national legislation, and if it's not really translated into anything concrete, into something that you can hold on to and translate into concrete actions, then I would think that it's more lip service than it's actually meaningful. But I would say talk to people on the ground that are supposed to be impacted by this, and if they are not, then it's not helping.
I wonder if anybody has an example of something that is working concretely in their own countries. Does anybody want to jump up and wave the flag for their own country?
Yeah, especially also in the current crisis, I would love to hear what member states are doing and if it's helping. There was a follow-up question. Yeah, it's truly impactful and enhancing inclusivity. I would say if it's built together with the stakeholders as well. If there was no consultation process, if there was no meaningful input from people on the ground, I would say that's already a very bad start. Yeah.
Great. All right, so happy to do a little Q&A right now if anybody has any questions for Helene, because as I said, the next part of this session is going to focus much more on the financing and funding part. And you know, to a degree, these are related, but if there's any specific questions you have for Helene, this would be a great time to propose them. All right, so I'm going to introduce now then our second speaker. It's Kevin Chaplet, who is with Les Amis de Enercoupe and Energy Solidaire. Kevin studied economics and international development at the University of Chester in England and at ULB in Belgium. He's been involved in a number of NGOs and then became program chief at Les Amis de Enercoupe, which is a nonprofit think and do tank promoting a citizen-led energetic transition. He's in charge of the development and coordination of the energy poverty mitigation program for Energy Solidaire. And Energy Solidaire, yes, so we just said it's an energy mitigation program, and through micro donations on energy bills schemes, Energy Solidaire provides funds to existing initiatives and on alleviating energy poverty. And what Kevin has done is a lot of surveys and workshops to try to figure out what's working and what's not for financing and funding. So Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Hope you had a good day in this webinar, learning about what we do within CEES. So can you see my screen, though it's freezing, it seems? Marilyn, can you tell me if you can see my screen?
I can see it.
But it's weird. Let me see. That's it. Put it on. That's it. That's better.
There we go.
Let's go to the first one. Okay.
All right, perfect.
Okay, so so my role within CEES is to have a look at the different economic models related to each initiatives against energy poverty that exists amongst the different cooperatives within CEES, so Copernico, CEES, etc., etc. The idea was to have a look at what's existing, see what are the potential difficulties, the opportunities subsidies that could be available to us in order to strengthen their model and strengthen their impact on energy poverty where it applies. And so our work is based on 3 different phases. In the first phase is to have a look at what's existing. What are the sources of funding, advantages, inconveniences, principal challenges, and what lessons can we learn? So that's just an overview of the different sources of funding present in each of the cooperatives. So as we can see, we have 2 of them, Copernico and CEES, first of all, that rely only on one source of funding, at least when they started the CEES program. For Copernico, it's their program is based on people, members of the cooperative, lending other members of the cooperatives money in order for them to invest in self-consumption and production systems, solar systems, in order to consume some of the energy they produce and lower their energy bills. So it's a closed circuit. It's members that lend to other members. We'll get into a bit more detail just afterwards. CEES only relies on European subsidies in order for the program that they have to be implemented. And it started a couple of years ago, and it lasted only as long as the EU subsidies were actually coming in. And as soon as they stopped these subsidies, then the program stopped. So that's one of the issues that we'll look at afterwards. Then we have Ali Energy, Repowering London, and Les Sept-Vents. Ali Energy and Repowering London are both in the UK, Ali Energy being in Scotland, and Les Sept-Vents being in France. So these 3 cooperatives have a much more complex economic model based on different sources of funding that combined manages them to implement their programs. And we can see that state subsidies, private subsidies, well, at least public subsidies for Ali Energy and Sept-Vents are quite important, as well as private subsidies. We can see for Ali Energy and Repowering London, it makes more than half of their total budget. So there's a strong dependency, let's say, on these sources of funding, and the problem is to have a look at what happens when one of those sources just runs dry. Sorry. And then we have Énergie Solidaire, which is a bit different in the way that Énergie Solidaire collects donations, micro donations on energy bills. We'll have a look at it just afterwards, and has a very strong partnership with the ENERCOP cooperative, which Lucie, who is present here, represents today. Therefore, our economic model is much more on strengthening the collection of donations and strengthening the partnership that we already have with ENERCOP, and perhaps see other opportunities with other kinds of partners, and we'll have a look at it afterwards as well. So we have a very strong diversity of economic models here. So very strong variety of contexts. Elena just talked about it, and of course, very strong, very different opportunities that will be available to them. So most of these cooperatives struggle with the budgets, finances, and stuff. For Copernico, it's the fact that they rely only on internal sources of funding makes their model quite fragile in a way that the problem is to how will they make their microloans affordable to those who have the most difficulties in managing to pay their bills and to provide the heat they need in the winter. For CEES, they need to restart their program, so they need to diversify their sources of funding. For Ali Energy, of course, diversification is key, just because some of the sources of funding that they have might disappear one day or fall short. There's usually competition amongst organizations such as Ali Energy in their country to be able to get some of the budget. So if you win, it's it's cool, but if you do, then it might have an impact on your ability to continue your work. Repowering London also has to reinvent itself regularly and try to find new sources of funding, new streams of funding. So they're really good at it. They do manage, but they would definitely benefit from a more stable source of funding in order to implement in the longer term some of the programs that they know are really efficient in tackling the issue at stake. Then we have CEES, who, as you've heard this morning, is working on self-rehabilitation, ways of renovating houses with professionals and voluntary workers, as well as the occupants themselves. It's the energy poverty angle to this activity was used to be implemented by another organization called NRTR, not far from that is based in the same area. So because Les Advents is taking some of this program, is going to start working a lot more on energy poverty alleviation, they need to find the right economic model in order to finance some of the work that they would like to do, because it's very different than just enabling renovation for people who have a lot more means. Let's just say that. And for Énergie Solidaire, our struggle is to keep on collecting donations and keep on having the best impact that we can have. So if we had to summarize some of the issues that we've noticed amongst all these cooperatives, is their sources of funding are most of the time limited in time. So they have to renew all the time, ask for a renewal, ask for a new source of funding, etc. And it creates uncertainty and obviously programs that sometimes have to stop in order to wait for another stream of funding to come in. Subject to policy changes, so public fundings are very much related to public policies, and public policies can change from one government to another regarding the context. And because of the context today, there's certainly some regulatory issues well, it's definitely interesting for those organizations to really keep a close eye on what's going on at the moment in their own respective countries. So regularly they need to find additional sources of funding when one stops, and that's quite difficult, and it's very tiring for the teams that need to do that. And there's globally a general uncertainty on their ability to continue delivering the services that they provide, and that doesn't make it's a too fragile basis in order to be able to see yourself in 5 years' time increasing your impact on energy poverty. As we all know, energy poverty is skyrocketing, and it's not the time to lower our ambitions. But this uncertainty in being able to do so is quite annoying. Let's just say that. So we've organized a workshop. 2 workshops, but there's one which was a bit more productive in terms of the what we've learned. So we gathered a couple of experts on energy poverty, but also crowdfunding, also NGOs and financing, and energy poverty, and so on, in order to have a look at 2 specific programs that are very different, CEES on the one hand and Copernico on the other. The idea was to spend enough time on those programs to be able to foster some ideas and see what we could tell CEES and Copernico as what could be an opportunity, what could be a lead for you to be able to strengthen your model. And so for CEES, is trying to collect donations and micro donations on energy bills, as well as other forms of donations, in order to be able to buy energy savings kits for households in energy poverty, which they identify through their program. We suggested maybe they should, besides micro donations, which is a replication of Énergie Solidaire, they could probably have a look at the micro loans as well, in order to invest in those kits, in order for those kits to be affordable for those households in need. Maybe have a look at as well as crowdfunding campaigns, which can be quite impactful if they're well done. Donations in kind as well, because we have basically the material they try to provide could perhaps be given by those who produce it, or those who stock it anyway. Donations in kind is a way to collect donations that should be looked at. Also, as private partnerships, there's plenty of companies, private companies, usually across Europe, that want to get involved in sustainable development, in the energy transition, ecological transition through their CSR strategy. Therefore, it's always a good idea to have a look at what strategy that they implement, and if there's a place for further funding for energy poverty alleviation programs. And of course, CEES is really active in other forms of initiatives for the energy transition, and one of them leads to creating a mobile app linked to self-consumption energy systems, if I'm not mistaken. And there's an idea for those who utilize this app for every kilowatt that they don't consume, because they're making energy savings and they're being careful, then they could donate these savings through this mobile app. So that's a very interesting idea, and hopefully we'll have more information on this one in the months to come. And for Copernico, it's basically microloans amongst members of the cooperative. But the problem is, and Copernico was raising that, is the affordability of the loan for those who are have difficulties, finance difficulties already. So before they propose the microloan at a fixed rate, etc., etc., the idea would be to take a step back and have a look at what's the affordability of the people they're trying to target. Have they thought about implementing a grace period until the benefits of the investment in those renewable energy production plants are being felt? Therefore, you only pay as soon as you can feel the benefits of this investment. That could be an idea. A repayment based on the energy savings, so through a model or through the actual energy savings that you can observe. And of course, why not include subsidies and grants in order for each microloans to be more affordable, basically, and to lower the cost for the households who wish to benefit from them. So that took very interesting conversations amongst all of us, and of course some more general ideas rose as well. And one of them is nothing new, but public funding is definitely a very good source of funding in order to start a program or to continue a program. The actual context is a difficult one, definitely, and but perhaps some countries will implement some further laws and regulations, and perhaps budgets in order for organizations such as the cooperatives that we're talking about can tackle energy poverty the way they know they can do it. So definitely have a look at those public sources of funding. Then perhaps some of the organizations or the collective organizations that can have a big impact in terms of renovating houses and flats and habitats, at least that are usually occupied by people that are quite vulnerable, are the social landlords. And it's true that in France they're some of the most proactive in renovating their buildings. So possibly as well, they're very interesting in providing assistance to their tenants, and therefore it's really really interesting to have to see what are their ambitions on tackling energy poverty for their tenants, and perhaps it's one way to find strong partnerships and kickstart your own initiative against energy poverty. Of course, there's volunteers. Volunteers is very, it's again nothing new. It's always existed, but it's based on the implication of citizens, basically. And because we all know that what we're doing here, tackling energy poverty, is definitely a public matter and for the general interest. And therefore, volunteers, citizens, when it makes sense, basically, we shouldn't avoid asking and relying on such services, basically. And of course, yeah, we can work on the peer-to-peer basis. So those who've benefited from initiatives against energy poverty are the best people to be able to talk about the interests and the impacts of the initiatives that they've benefited from to other people that are suffering from energy poverty and that are still not really convinced that they should also go through the same scheme. And it's definitely something that is interesting, and that's the experience that we got from a lot of professionals. It's usually very useful, and it enables for a lot of people in energy poverty to get involved, just because they know that it's possible. Your life can change if you do this and that, and people that you can relate to are the best ones to talk about it. And that's pretty much it from the basis of the findings and perhaps the ideas that we could provide the CEES consortium. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about Énergie Solidaire. Marilyn, can you tell me if I'm being too long? Because I do tend to speak a lot and be quite slow. Is it okay? Are we? Have I still got time?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. So Énergie Solidaire is an endowment fund. An endowment fund is like a small foundation. It's between the association, non-profit organization, of course, and a foundation. So our job is to collect donations and redistribute the money that we collect. We don't redistribute money directly to people in energy poverty. We redistribute this money to local organizations that implement initiatives against energy poverty directly with the people in need. So our job is to collect micro donations from NRCOP clients. So NRCOP is a renewable energy provider. And of course, those who are willing to can donate a little bit more than what they pay for their consumption. It is from 1 cent per kilowatt. So for example, in 2022, we're going to be collecting 150,000 euros. And what we do is we organize a call for projects each year that is towards all the associations that work on energy poverty alleviation. And we redistribute this money accordingly regarding the quality of the programs and the impact of the program they wish to be partners with Énergie Solidaire. And that's what we've been doing for the last 3 years, because we only started 4 years ago to collect donations, and we've managed to redistribute 220,000 euros as of today. And this number should be doubled by next year. So it's increasing year after year. More and more people are sensible to the energy poverty subject and problematic, and they wish that something could be done, but they usually don't know how. So what we do is we provide information on what can be done. We propose very concrete actions, and people trust us to deliver this budget to those local organizations that really need it in order to have the impact that they wish. And of course, we've developed another way of collecting donations. It's energy surplus donations. So for installations, collective consumption with solar panels, basically, you consume what you produce, but there's always part of what you produce that is not being consumed. And what we propose is for this surplus to be donated instead of being sold. And this surplus, and then the value of this surplus, of this volume of energy, goes back to a local organization working on energy poverty alleviation. And it's a way for us to insist on the fact that renewable energies are a way to collect further resources and further wealth in order to fund the very much needed energy poverty alleviation programs. So it's a bit symbolic, but we're working on it, and hopefully it will take up at someday soon. And of course, Énergie Solidaire is open source type of program. So everything that we do is available to anyone who wants to reproduce it. So within CEES, the consortium, we have Repowering London, CEES, Les Sept Vents, and Ali Energy that are interested in implementing some kind of what Énergie Solidaire does. Of course, it has to be adapted to their different contexts, possibilities, and of course where it makes sense. So we're going to and that's what we've started to do, and to provide some our expertise in order to implement the micro donation system, the energy surplus donations, other forms of collecting donations, because there's loads of way of doing so, and we have quite a bit of experience in that, and of course continue trying to collect private subsidies. That being said, Énergie Solidaire has very recently had another opportunity that is pretty much changing our strategy for the next couple of years. The way ENERCOP is built is decentralized. So there's one cooperative, the national cooperative, which Lucy represents, and there's 10 other cooperatives that are based regionally and that provide services as well, and that are very much involved in making the energy transition happen. And Énergie Solidaire wants to be also decentralized, because we believe that the energy transition has to happen in the territories directly, and to be close. The closer you get to the issues, the better you'll find ways to tackle it. So therefore, we've started a partnership with a region in the south called Occitanie, which is fairly big. It's a big. It's a region that is very much proactive in the energy transition. There's lots of new means of production that are being developed in this territory, and they thought that they needed to complement their action with something towards energy poverty alleviation. It's not just about producing renewable energy, it's about taking care of those most in need also. So therefore, we're going to collect donations regionally from all the producers, developers, energy producers, I believe, developers, all the businesses, and as well the general public, in order to redistribute all this money back to local initiatives having taking place locally, and that could be implemented in each of the regions that compose the French territory. So that's our strategy, because public bodies, authorities cannot collect donations. They can't do that, but they're the ones that implementing a lot of the solutions that exist, at least in France, in order to tackle energy poverty. Which is why let's say the scale of our implication on financing energy poverty mitigation programs is the good one, because it's really complementary to what already exists. And so beware that perhaps you should have a look at public authorities as well, and perhaps invent new ways of working with them and complement their actions. That's it for me, I think. Thank you everyone for listening, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. That was super informative and interesting. And, you know, it really is clear that to to get through these, to do what we aim to do, we need to have pretty diverse portfolios, because the risk is high if you're depending on one source of income.
Yeah.
There is a specific question to you in the chat, which I'm just trying to open up.
I'm sharing.
Okay. So how is Enercoup's Energy Solidaire program working out since the crisis started? Are you finding that as people are paying higher energy prices, are they still willing to donate, or has there been a negative impact?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because it's the opposite of what you would all think. Usually the prices go up, and you would imagine that people have less money to donate. However, because Enercoup clients are usually quite implicated in the energy transition, and they know that it's really necessary, etc., etc. Well, they donate more, actually. They go on there. We have an online website, basically, where they can control the amount they donate every month. And what we've figured that is that there's a lot of increase in the amounts that are being donated, and we never lowered the amount we collect each month. It always goes up.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Good. There's also Rachel brought up the point that, in all households in Europe are getting a £400 energy bill support scheme, and it would be ideal if people who didn't need that would donate it to help other families that do. I'm sure that I've read about a couple of charities that are trying to do that, but I just did a quick look and I couldn't find them. So if anybody has that information and can share it with others, it would be great. Enact does exist as a nonprofit, and if people wanted to make a donation to us, we could try to figure out a way to pass it on to pay off people's energy bills or help with paying off people's energy bills. We don't have a specific scheme for that yet, but it's something we've certainly had in mind, and we have the nonprofit status to facilitate that. All right, any other questions? We have about 4 minutes left in this session, because we do want to give you a little break before the last session, but very, very happy to take any other questions or hear any comments. It's really encouraging, Kevin, that you're seeing more donations every month.
Yeah, it is. It seems like the more we have problems, the more people get involved. So it's very reassuring in a sense.
Yeah. All right, if there's no other questions or comments, we will let you sneak out a few minutes early on this one, so you can go get a coffee and have a glass of water and maybe stick your head out the window. It's a beautiful sunny day in Paris today, and I'm looking out the window all day thinking, I got to get out there. So maybe I'll at least go stand on my balcony for a few minutes. And at 4 o'clock, we're going to wrap up with our session that is looking at how do you measure impact and how do you evaluate the effectiveness of your program overall. So thanks for being here, and we'll see you again in 15 minutes or so.